Hi friends, it's Cassandra. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a video response to Linda's Pantry in which she is asking canners to share their canning tips. I really enjoyed watching a lot of the videos that other canning creators have shared, and so I'm gonna go ahead and add some of my canning tips. I do want you to know that the canning tips that I share are not technical ones. Instead, the canning tips that I'm going to share are more about organization and canning mindset. If this is our first time meeting, my channel is all about how I'm becoming a farm girl. My husband and I are homestead dreamers, currently living in the city, and we're turning our townhome into an urban homestead. So each week I post videos sharing how I'm cultivating a homestead mindset and how you can too. So if you're a fellow homestead dreamer, definitely click subscribe for weekly tips and encouragement. My first tip is that I recommend incorporating some type of canning inventory system into your canning routine, even if you're on the smaller side of canning. And my thinking behind this is that as you grow in your canning journey in terms of volume and consumption, you're really able to fine-tune the quantities that you need to be processing for the jars you have and the meals that you want to eat in the coming years to a T. And as long as you don't overcomplicate it, keeping and maintaining an inventory system is pretty simple, and I'll share with you what I do. I got it from the blog myfrugalhome.com, and she actually has a lot of very helpful and useful canning inventory sheets that you can immediately download. And what's great about it is that you can customize it by writing the item, and then it has all of these mason jars here for the quantity, and then there's the size, so whether you're canning quarts, pints, or half pints. So then all I did is I took a report cover and I repurposed it for my canning inventory, and it's just, I think, 3 or 4 pages. Again, I am on the smaller side of canning. I'm currently processing about 300 to 350 jars a year. And so at the top of one of the pages, it's labeled vegetables. On the second page, I have meat, stocks, and broths, and on the third page, I have other/fruit. And so this has been so great because I leave it in my kitchen, and as I am processing something, I will go ahead and take this out. For example, if I have just canned 10 quarts of green beans and 16 pints of corn, I'll go ahead and write the corresponding number of P's or Q's onto the canning inventory sheet. And then as I actually pull these items from my pantry later on, I'll just put an X through that jar so I know exactly not only how much I've canned and perhaps need to can, but then how much I'm also using. Now, I am still in the process of building my jar inventory, but having this inventory sheet was especially helpful this year because I was able to look through and see the items that I used a lot of or ran out of, and then also some of the items that I still have a lot of. And so I know without having to physically count jars or allocate time to do that, looking at this canning inventory sheet allowed me to really be, quite honestly, ruthless about things that I can and use a lot versus some areas where I may needed to pull back on. So my second tip is to make sure that you are labeling your lids. And there are 3 pieces of information that I like to include on the lid of all of my canning jars. And the information that I like to include is the name of the item, the date that I canned it, and then the price that I paid. And I like including these options because even though it might be obvious or I think I'll remember what I canned, it can be a little confusing, especially when you get into creating your jams and preserves and broths. You may not be able to easily discern what exactly you canned months down the road. I also like to include the date that I canned it because as I put my jars into downstairs storage, it enables me to order them from most recent to oldest processing dates. And then I also like to include the price I paid for the item because although I'm always canning items that are in season, and so they're typically at their sale price, it's always a good note for me to kind of notice how prices are either stabilizing or going up. And so what I'll do is I'll save one of the lids from each of the items that I use, and it enables me to always have the price front and center. For example, I know that a really good price for chicken around my area is 98 cents a pound. Now, I'm able to mostly get that because I buy whole chickens, but occasionally there are sales on chicken breasts and other pre-cut up parts that reach that sale price. And so when they do, I know that that's a symbol that I need to go out and buy those items. For example, on this jar of corn, I noted that the price was 5 for $1. So 5 ears for $1. That's 20 cents an ear, which is fantastic. And so I know that when I'm looking in the sales ads or at the farmer's market, kind of what price I should be looking for to really stack up and bulk buy. All right, so my third tip is that you're going to need to find a way to protect your canning inventory. Unless you are one of the lucky ones that was fortunate enough to have a canning jar inventory passed on to you, you are going to make an initial investment in building up a large quantity of jars. Jars are part of your canning equipment. And if you're a canner like me that loves sharing what you can with other non-canners, you may need to find a way to gently remind them that you need those jars back. Otherwise, you can quickly start to realize that you have 20, 30, 40 or more jars that are unaccounted for that are missing from your inventory for when you go to start canning. Now, I don't think that this is done with malicious intent. Some folks just don't know. So one of the things that I like to do when I am giving a gift to a person that I haven't shared one of my canned items with is I will take a little gift tag and I will attach it to the rim of each of the jars and secure it with a rubber band. And then I'll add a little note that says, for free refills, please return the jar. So it's a subtle but also direct way to let them know that, hey, I need the jar back. And for me, it's not about the cost of the food that's in the jar. It's actually just having the equipment that I know isn't kind of skewing off the set of jars that I have that are for my household use versus having another quantity of jars that leave and just never come back. So with my closest circle of about 10 to 15 friends, they'll either purchase a set of jars for me. I know that I have X amount of jars that are just allocated for friends and family that as they finish those items, they'll return them to me. My next piece of advice is to set yourself up for success when you're canning by having all of your items laid out and cleaned the night before you start canning. So what I'll do is I'll make sure that I've sterilized, if necessary, all of my jars the night before, that I've inspected them for cracks, that I have the amount of rings and lids that I need, and everything is laid out so that when I start canning, I'm not running into unexpected problems. Now, I've been canning for several years now, but this year I had to get really creative about expanding my jar collection. Normally I'm able to find excellent deals at a hardware center or at the thrift store, but not in 2020. So I had to get really creative, and even though I'm an avid thrifter, I've never used Facebook Marketplace, and that's because I'm just not a Facebook user. But this year I was able to use Facebook Marketplace to find several dealers that were selling their canning jars at a reasonable price. I'm talking about 20 cents a jar. And here's the reason in particular that I'm not going to cross out using Facebook Marketplace. So the vendors that I was buying my canning jars from were from older women that were no longer going to be canning in the future. And so they were selling sets of 60 to 80 canning jars, and they were in mint condition. And what's really cool about their canning jars is that some of the jars that I have now inherited are vintage collections. And I was able to strike up some of the most heartfelt conversations with people that were just a few minutes ago complete strangers to me. And I just love that about the canning community. We talked about what they used to can and their favorite recipes. We talked about the style of the jar and when it came out. These were excellent conversations that I was having with the folks that I was obtaining their jars from. I really love doing this for this reason. So there was a woman that had sold me 80 jars. I know, I found 80 jars for like $30 this year. But she sold me those jars and we got into an excellent conversation. And then just a couple of weeks ago, she contacted me again to say that she had come across even more jars and would I be interested. Of course. So this was such a blessing to me because it's practically impossible to find canning jars. And I've been out in the stores and as soon as they come in, they're gone. And so it's just a matter of timing. But if you can connect with someone who is selling canning jars, then they can typically connect you with other people, or when they have more inventory available, they're going to think about you first. And then you just don't have to deal with the hassle of stores. Another tip I have is that along your canning journey, keep experimenting and stay encouraged. Canning is half art and half science. And so just know going into this that there will be times where perhaps you blanch something for too long, or you can something that was already a little too ripe, or you process something a bit too long, or a number of other things that can impact the final product. Don't give up, you'll absolutely get there. There are so many canners out there, whether it's through books or YouTube videos or blogs that each have their own unique way of canning and preserving and recipes that are in abundance. So definitely always make sure that you're keeping an eye out for ways that people can things differently, which is why I love watching canning videos. Speaking of experimenting, how many of y'all saw Linda's video that she posted, I think it was just yesterday, on jalapeno cranberry sauce? I am so excited. So excited, in fact, that I went out this morning and got everything I need. I'm not kidding. Here are the jalapenos, here are the cranberries. And the crazy thing is that I don't even like cranberry sauce, but the combination of flavors, I think, between the tartness of the cranberries, I mean, I'll drink cranberry juice, but I'm not someone that has to have cranberry sauce on their turkey. But the combination of the tartness from the cranberries and then the spiciness from the jalapenos, which I am going to enjoy, and then the sweet from the sugar, I think it's going to be great. And the fact that it's a spreadable sauce, meaning that I can add it to sandwiches or even a number of meats, I'm really excited to try this. And worst case scenario, I will jar this up and send some jars to my folks that live in a different state. But that's what I'm talking about. Stay plugged into watching others' videos because you just never know. I have never had jalapeno cranberry sauce as a part of my repertoire of pantry items, but I'm excited to add it to my pantry because it keeps the monotony of foods that you go to all of the time fresh and exciting because you have a twist and you can incorporate new taste into your everyday meals. So another tip that I have when it comes to canning is to continuously educate yourself about the practices and especially the science behind why canning is safe, because this is a question that you will inevitably counter, whether it's in real life or if you're still kind of deciding whether or not you want to start canning your own foods. So for example, being able to tell the difference between low and high acid foods helps you to determine whether you're going to pressure can or water bath an item. And being able to determine what type of pressure canner will work best for you, whether it's a weighted or a dial gauge, are all important considerations and information that you need to know so that you can become a confident canner. A number of other canning videos have mentioned tons of helpful resources. I'll go ahead and include some links to this information in the description box below. Another tip I have is to connect with the canning community, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook, YouTube, or on blogs. And this isn't just because I think we're some of the loveliest folks. It's because, like me, you may be canning but not have anyone in your actual real life that is canning. And so when you get really excited about canning something, you want to have someone that you can have an authentic conversation with. Y'all, I had so much fun doing this tag, and honestly, what I'm doing right after this is creating Linda's Pantry's recipe for the jalapeno cranberry sauce. But one thing that I did want to share is that if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, check out some of my grocery haul videos. Pretty much what I do is, it's not a typical haul. It is showing how I use food preservation methods to kind of treat the grocery store like a farmer's market. If this is the first video that you're watching of mine, I am a homestead dreamer. So while we are still currently working full-time and living in the city in a townhouse, we are cultivating a homestead mindset. And so there are a number of skills that I am learning and sharing with you on this channel that take place in my kitchen or garden. Until next week, take care, friends.